RDIF that have been cut off by the US, and talking about how that really will cut off the cushy funds that have enabled Putin and his counterparts to carry out the escalation that we have seen on the ground. Viewers, from the very beginning, we had seen how the US had been talking about dissuading Russia from carrying out this escalation, talking about a warning that had been issued to Russia as well in terms of the economic sanctions. And of course, US had then been also announcing the economic sanctions and aid to Ukraine as well. And now the latest statement that is coming in from the White House talking about the sanctions and how it is going to cut off the cushy funds that are funding the Russian escalation on the ground in Ukraine.
As far as the global, the world is concerned, we have seen how the US has essentially reacted. They've also called it, an unnecessary escalatory move that has been made by Russia. Remember, this comes at a time when Russians have seen a massive pushback, especially in the city of Kiev, which perhaps even the Russians did not expect. What has really happened right now is all the checkposts in Kiev have now been manned, not just by the Ukrainian army or for that matter just the Ukrainian police, but the citizens are also now on the road. Now it has become imperative on Ukrainian men between the age of 18 and 66 to be a part of this war. And in fact, what we have seen is women and children are the only one who are now moving towards the borders, where there has been a massive line, about 20 miles of lines that we have seen, especially in places like Poland.
Now viewers, we're getting some more dramatic shots from the city of Chernihiv now, where black flames, large clouds of black flames can be seen billowing from the center of the Chernihiv city. Now once again, those visuals of the escalation there in Ukraine reaching the Chernihiv city, and of course another place that is of geographic importance in the north of Ukraine. Remember, there is a three-pronged attack that the Russian troops are carrying out in the north, in the east and the south. And this particular video is from the north of Ukraine in Chernihiv, in the center of the city. We see this kind of an attack that has led to large clouds billowing from the center of the city in Chernihiv, of course, very close to Kyiv. And as we had been getting those ground reports that Russian troops trying to make their way from three directions towards the capital of Ukraine, that is Kyiv, and now these visuals really self-explanatory of the kind of escalation that the Russian troops are carrying out on the ground now in the northern parts of Ukraine, in the city of Chernihiv. And Shivani Sharma joins me on the broadcast. Shivani, now we are getting the kind of visuals of Russian escalation there in Ukraine, in the north of Ukraine specifically now. Huge number of shellings, reports of which we're getting. What more are you picking up from where you are standing right now?
See, Priyanka, the situation is emerging each moment. Whenever we are there with a story, there is an update on the other side. I am right now in Slovakia. This is the border area. If my VJ Suren Shah can show you how the look is deserted, because this is the war time, and here there are no people which can be seen. And this is a different picture that is emerging after 5 days of war in Ukraine. And if we talk about the build-up by the Russian troops in Spain and other parts, it shows how President Putin is now showing his complete strength on this whole situation, while the Ukrainian president is also now trying to get more aid from his allies, be it the Slovakian government that has now announced that it will be supplying the munitions, the anti-tank and air defense systems for Ukraine to get it stronger in this particular war. And in Kyiv also, the attacks are going more and more aggressive each day, and Russian president has also given a warning that the nuclear deterrence systems are ready. The defense minister has also reasserted the same, and the situation is quite tense in this whole region. If I talk about the European Union nations that are sharing the borders with Ukraine, be it Hungary, be it Slovakia, Poland, and all these countries are feeling the impact of this war that is going inside Ukraine. The facilities are now shrinking, not only inside Ukraine, but also in these neighboring states that share the border with Ukraine, because for us also reaching here, reporting from here in terms of logistics has been quite challenging, because the normal frequency of taxis or the normal frequencies of mode of transport is impacted certainly, and the movement of trucks, movement of vehicles across the borders has been impacted, because most of the borders have been now choked up with the people who want to get evacuated to their safe places, who are running from Ukraine to outside. More than 4 lakh people have already fled from Ukraine to safer places, and most of these countries in the European Union are welcoming the residents of Ukraine without any documents, because they need to help them, they want to help them, they want to show they are standing tall with Ukraine in this need of crisis. But Russia is now trying to show that how it is getting the control of the whole situation in Ukraine in terms of more and more attacks, more and more build-ups, and the claims that are coming in from President Zelensky also show that both the sides are now claiming that they are standing strong in this war. While the talks are on, there are hopes, but doesn't seem with the actions on ground, as we are reporting how the build-ups are increasing, not only from the Russian side, but the NATO is also claiming that it is supplying more and more weapons to Ukraine. It is having more and more exercises on the border areas. So now we are trying to get inside and close to those places where NATO is having its build-ups in terms of armored, in terms of its troops, and the emerging situation seems to be quite challenging, and people out here are worried and tensed.
Well, yes, Shivani, of course, the situation getting more tense, and we implore you to take care of yourself, stay safe, and thank you for joining us with that detailed ground report for the moment.
Well, as far as civilian movement is concerned, it's absolutely nil, rather, at least on the roads, because what we did was yesterday in the afternoon when we were on our way to two areas. One was a metro station and the other was the place where an attack took place, a missile strike took place. While we were on our way, it's completely fortified. This entire city is completely fortified. You would rather have the police right now on the tenterhooks, because the moment we were also reporting, Priyanka, cameras were out. They were quite agitated, not very sure whether their movement is being disclosed, because remember, there have been reports that have been doing the rounds that at least 30 people with arms have been moving around the city of Kiev. The Ukrainian police rather suspects that this could be Russian troops in Ukrainian army fatigue, who are basically moving around the city, and that could indicate that there is a change in the tactic of the Russian troop.
Up next, viewers, we are getting some breaking inputs as far as the Russia-Ukraine talks are concerned. We have seen how the delegation had reached Belarus, and the Belarusian minister had assured that you are safe here, after which all the journalists in fact had been asked to leave, and now the talks, the very crucial talks between the delegation of Ukraine and Russia are currently underway, where the first priority given by the Ukrainian delegation had been that of ceasefire, of immediate ceasefire and exiting of the Russian troops from the area of Ukraine. But now we see that the talks in fact are currently underway, and there is no let up on the bombardment. Even as those talks continue, viewers, we're still getting the images on the ground which are showing a very gruesome picture of escalation, and In fact, we are getting some information of the meeting that has taken place of Zelensky's office now claiming that Kyiv demands withdrawal of all Russian troops at talks, including from Crimea and Donbas as well. Now, this is a surprising move from Ukraine, perhaps also talking about the Crimea, which is the southern peninsula that had been annexed by Moscow in 2014. And now Ukraine putting that back on the table and asking for an immediate withdrawal of the Russian troops from the area.
UN Refugee Agency has essentially indicated that 4 lakh, that's the number, 4 lakh Ukrainians are basically moving out. So all in all, while on the one hand you're looking at the Russians facing a massive, a stiff resistance, it remains to be seen for how long will this exactly continue, because the latest reports also suggest, Priyanka, that the Russian troops have now bypassed Kharkiv and they were basically on their way to Kiev. And right now what you see around me, let me just quickly also give you a quick check of the areas that we are. We are basically on a highway from where we are currently reporting from. I'll ask Rawatji to show you on the left hand side, completely deserted, exactly what we saw even yesterday, because there is a curfew that has already been imposed. So for people to get any access to food and water is obviously going to be very difficult, because mostly large part of the population in Kiev right now is living in shelters.
Time here for a short break, viewers, getting you all the details of the Russia-Ukraine talks that are currently underway, where Ukraine has put Crimea back on the table for negotiation. Stay tuned.
In the latest Indian university rankings announced by QS, the world's leading university rankings organization, India's #1 ranked universities in various categories are IISc Bangalore, IIT Bombay, University of Delhi, University of Calcutta and Amity University.
What's very interesting is that how the people of Ukraine have also supported their government. You've had men between the age of 18 and 60 now returning to the country. About 25,000 ammunition has already been provided. This has been provided to the Ukrainian citizens so that they can participate in this war and ensure that their country essentially emerges victorious. Russians, on the one hand, they've been saying that these missile attacks that have taken place, the targeted attacks that we have seen in the last 48 hours, especially in the residential areas, they are saying that this was not conducted by them. If you simply go by their claim, they are saying that the air defense system of the Ukrainian army has gone awry. That's why some of these missiles have struck their own buildings, which the Ukrainians have already rejected. Well, in fact, now we are getting you images from a mall in central Kyiv. This mall has opened for just about 10 minutes. People that we have spoken to, suppliers in hotels, they are saying that the stocks essentially is going to last max to max for another week or so. Take a look at this. Shelves which are completely empty. You have stocks which are not enough. You have people already coming out and they're buying whatever they can. People are literally, hoarding at this point in time.
ये रिपब्लिक भारत ने एक्सक्लूसिव जानकारी दी है और रिपब्लिक भारत के कैमरे में वो आर्मी के जवान भी कैद हुए हैं जो 29 लोगों को ढूंढ रहे हैं जो हथियार लेकर इस समय कीव की सड़कों पर घूम रहे हैं.
In upper northern regions of Ukraine, we have seen there is a massive pushback really coming in from the Ukrainian army. A short while back, there were images that came in of the Russian equipment.
इस समय रिपब्लिक टीवी नेटवर्क पहुंच गया है लोमनोस की वो एवेन्यू जहां पर जोरदार धमाका हुआ था और धमाके के बाद किस तरीके से दहला था वो तस्वीर इस समय मेरे पीछे आप देख रहे हैं वो हमारी टीम आपको दिखा रही है और हम एक ऐसे एकमात्र चैनल हैं जो यहां पर पहुंचे हैं
is exactly what happens when a war actually reaches a city, an urban area where you're looking at large-scale destruction. Look at the condition right now. You look at the condition right now where you see the debris lying all over, really heartbreaking images of what you see, books that are lying all over. You're looking at this kind of destruction which is now reached residential areas. While what you see right now are fighter jets on the skies of Kiev. Caught on Republic camera. Take a look at it. Low-flying fighter jets that you see clearly. That's the situation right now on the ground. Just behind me. Just behind me.
ये रिपब्लिक भारत ने एक्सक्लूसिव जानकारी दी है और रिपब्लिक भारत के कैमरे में वो आर्मी के जवान भी कैद हुए हैं जो उन 30 लोगों को ढूंढ
Up next, viewers, we're getting some visuals now from Ukraine where the civilians are preparing to fight off the Russian troops. It appears that the civilians in fact have created barricades and hindrances for the movement of the Russian troops. Remember, from the very beginning, President Zelensky had called it a war of the people and had appealed the civilians to come out on the streets and defend their motherland. And that's exactly what it seems that the civilians are right now doing on the ground there in Ukraine, where they have created barricades and sharp objects that have been kept on the ground so that the prevention can be carried out of movement of the Russian troops who are escalating and moving towards Kyiv from 3 directions. And now we see the latest visuals of civilians coming out with makeshift equipment along with ammunition that was given to them by the government to defend their motherland as appealed to them by their President Zelensky. They're very heartwarming visuals. In fact, you can see the civilians coming out and defending their own country, trying to stop the movement of the Russian troops with makeshift equipment and ammunition that have been given to them by the government. Up next, viewers, rapid developments with respect to the Ukrainian crisis. Now, Prime Minister is all set to chair another meeting with respect to the Ukrainian crisis, also to talk about the evacuation of the Indian nationals, the Indian students that have been stranded there in Ukraine. And now we see another meeting that is being chaired by the Prime Minister to talk about the specifics of the evacuation and the security arrangement for the Indian nationals who are trying to make their way out of Ukraine. Time now for a short break, viewers. Coming up on the other side, getting you all the details of how 3 union ministers
on ground that may have had a role in stalling the swift Russian takeover of Kiev, because Kiev is not only being defended, Kiev is also fighting back, except this threat that has come now: evacuate this city by late night tonight and something else could happen. Intensification of operation. Can all these groups stand up to those intensified operations, Rahul? Remains the big question now.
And it also shows a massive disconnect between the men who are planning this war, because they are way too wise, and President Putin. They would have understood that if there is a pushback, you will need more troops. There is no doubt about it. Maybe they don't have their heart in the war. Maybe they're not fully aligned with President Putin. And that shows serious internal fissures inside Russia. We'll build on all of this. The nuclear deterrent forces are on a state of high alert. That adds a huge nuclear dimension to this already very volatile state of war. I'll get you more details from the India Today War Room when we come back on the other side of a quick break. Stay tuned.
Russia declared war on Ukraine, as the world was plunged again into crisis, with the only Indian team in the real war zone.
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound.
I will show you a quick, so to say, bombshell room tour.
I can smell the gunpowder in the air.
And without pause, India Today totally dominates viewership and smashes the competition. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
For policyholders. What does that mean? That means that if you have a LIC policy,
critics, they are told under pain of high treason.
That's it for now. Another reminder.
The moment. It is essentially a city under siege.
Peace talks between Ukraine and Russian officials are taking place today on the Belarusian border. Kiev's calls for a ceasefire beforehand were ignored, and there are few expectations of a diplomatic breakthrough. Well, let's talk now to Osia Lutsevich. She's head of Ukraine Forum at the UK think tank Chatham House. Thanks for taking time to speak to us here on the programme. We mentioned the ceasefire which Kiev officials had called for. They'd also called for a troop withdrawal from their territory. Both conditions ignored. So what can we hope realistically to come out of these talks today?
I'm sure that these talks are the first of meetings in the series of understanding what kind of diplomatic solution could be negotiated on the background of quite severe military aggression of Russia. And Russia steps up the stakes. In 4 days, there were over 300 missiles hitting Ukrainian cities. It's clearly that Ukraine's negotiating position will depend very much on the successes or failures of Russian armed forces. And so far, Ukraine is quite confident talking to the Russians because Russian armed forces have quite limited success.
Okay. Why do you think it is that the Russian armed forces have had this limited success? Because they're going into these talks at the same time, with the gun of that nuclear threat behind their backs.
Well, that is a clear step up, and I think the whole world is now understanding what kind of pariah state Putin's regime is. And I think that the reasons for Russian armed forces is because it's an external invasion of an independent country for the territorial grab. Ukraine is defending. It has quite high morale from the armed forces to local administrations to civilians. I'm talking to my friends all across Ukraine, and there was of course shock and anxiety at the beginning, but as Ukraine holds ground, there's more and more perseverance not to surrender an inch of Ukrainian soil and to push Russians out. Ukrainians are subscribing to the armed forces, territorial defense units. So there is the national mobilization to fight Russians in Ukraine.
So what do you think Moscow now then is looking to, what's its end game? Do you think its conditions have changed?
Well, as I said, Putin had a war endgame scenario in his head, but it's clearly failing. He was hoping for this blitzkrieg to take over Kyiv, to topple and kill Zelensky, and basically install a puppet military regime. It's only in a kind of...
in Kiev have now been manned not just by the Ukrainian army or for that matter just the Ukrainian police, but the citizens are also now on the road. We are just crossing one checkpoint. Now that checkpoint is completely manned by the
Russia-Ukraine hold crucial talks at Belarus border. Ukraine demands a ceasefire. As West sanctions Russia, President Vladimir Putin puts nukes on alert. Belarus votes to go nuclear amid ally Russia's offensive on Ukraine. United States shuts down its embassy in Minsk. Kyiv administration lifts weekend curfew. India advises Indians to head to train station. Republic, the only global network reporting live from war zone Kyiv. PM Modi to chair 4th meeting on Ukraine crisis. And 3 union ministers to travel to Ukraine's neighboring countries to oversee evacuation operations. This breaking news that's coming in, US Prime Minister will soon be chairing a high-level meeting on the Ukraine situation. Sources say this could be a meeting that would try and understand to ensure how Indians are going to be evacuated out of the Ukrainian crisis, and also a high-level meeting on the entire Ukraine situation. We're also being told, as the PM is going to soon be chairing this high-level meeting, that earlier on in the day he had also spoken to spiritual leaders. He'd also spoken to others to ensure and discuss steps and measures for the safe evacuation of Indian students in Ukraine. Remember, as Moscow and Kyiv entered the fifth day of intense fighting, India's Prime Minister also mobilized government officials and Indian community members, overseas organizations and spiritual bodies to discuss events. Let's listen in to a reaction coming in from the MEA.
We are making progress. I think you can see it day by day. But let me start with what you've seen already, which is that decision to send special envoys of Honorable Prime Minister to the 4 countries neighboring, well actually 5, but we have a common envoy for 2 countries, to the countries neighboring Ukraine. Specifically, Honorable Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia will be going to Romania, and will also go to Moldova, and I'll come to a bit on the Moldova story. Honorable Minister Kiren Rijiju will go to the Slovak Republic. Honorable Minister Hardeep Puri would be going to Hungary, and Honorable Minister General V.K. Singh would be going to Poland. You've seen some reports already, let me confirm that. These special envoys will be traveling to these countries basically to coordinate and oversee the evacuation process there on the ground. If situation permitting, you might also find them going to the as close as possible to where the evacuation happening. So that will depend on the specific circumstances. But I think you will see them operating there, coordinating all the efforts, and as I mentioned, being in touch with local authorities and as well as with other partners that are helping in this process. We are making progress. I think you can see it day by day. But let me start with what you've seen already, which is that decision to send special envoys of Honorable Prime Minister to the 4 countries neighboring, well actually 5, but we have a common envoy for 2 countries, to the countries neighboring Ukraine. Specifically, Honorable Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia will be going to Romania, and will also go to Moldova, and I'll come to a bit on the Moldova story. Honorable Minister Kiren Rijiju will go to the Slovak Republic. Honorable Minister Hardeep Puri would be going to Hungary, and Honorable Minister General V.K. Singh would be going to Poland. You've seen some reports already, let me confirm that. These special envoys will be traveling to these countries basically to coordinate and oversee the evacuation process there on the ground. If situation permitting, you might also find them going to the as close as possible to where the evacuation happening. So that will depend on the specific circumstances. But I think you will see them operating there, coordinating all the efforts, and as I mentioned, being in touch with local authorities and as well as with other partners that are helping in this process.
A mall in central Kyiv which just opened about 10 minutes ago. Many would be wondering as to what are we really doing inside a mall, that too in a war-torn zone. But the fact of the matter, viewers, is that right now the challenges are beyond just the battlefield. It is now reaching every household in Ukraine, and that is the shortage of food supplies in Ukraine. People are literally hoarding at this point in time, and rightfully so, because right now the fear is that for how long will the stocks last? That's the bigger concern. Take a look at this. Almost every area that you go to, every store, every department that you go into, I'll try and focus on the empty shelves a little bit, because that will give you a sense of the reality right now in Ukraine. Many would say that perhaps this gives you a different optimistic image, but it's not really that optimistic. Let me tell you that. The reason being is that the back end is essentially indicating right now, the back end is indicating that the stocks may not last for a very, very long time, and that's the bigger concern.
And viewers, we just heard Shravan there reporting from the market. I'm also going to tell you Republic is reporting from Donetsk, where Russia is continuing its offensive even as it declared the region independent. Here's a report from Patrick Lancaster.
People are living. This is the center of Donetsk. So we can see a crater here, and where the shrapnel just ripped through this part of the stairs here. All of this just destroyed. And we've met people inside that were hiding from the shelling itself. There's women, children. It doesn't make any sense. Why does Ukraine continue to target these civilian areas on a daily basis? We're right next door to a hospital here in Donetsk. People are living. This is the center of Donetsk. So we can see a crater here, and where the shrapnel just ripped through this part of the stairs here. All of this just destroyed. And we've met people inside that were hiding from the shelling itself. There's women, children. It doesn't make any sense. Why does Ukraine continue to target these civilian areas on a daily basis? We're right next door to a hospital here in Donetsk.
Viewers, we are getting shots from outside Ukrainian embassy. This is we are cutting across to Ukrainian embassy in Delhi, where we are getting shots from a peaceful prayer outside Ukraine embassy in Delhi that is taking place as we are speaking. So even as that dialogue is underway in Belarus, we're getting you shots of a peace prayer outside the Ukraine embassy in the capital, and this is taking place at as I said, the Ukraine embassy, where a lot of different nationals have gathered. Candles are being put, prayers are being given for possibly for brethren and their citizens of Ukraine. So as we are showing you these shots first on Republic TV, the larger picture is that as Russian nukes are on alert, as those talks are continuing at Belarus between Ukraine and Russia, peace prayers are also being held outside Ukraine embassy in Delhi for the people of Ukraine. Remember, Russian troops are already surrounding the city of Kyiv and others. There is shelling, explosions, firing taking place. Over 5 lakh refugees have already left Ukraine. For everyone and for the safety of the state, at the Ukraine embassy in Delhi, peace prayers are being held. And as we stay with those pictures, we remember that a lot of sanctions have been imposed on Russia. We recall that Ukraine is getting help from some states. It's also the President Zelensky has refused to leave the country. Those negotiation and talks are being held between Ukraine and Russia. And as we are speaking, those talks are being held at Belarus. At the same time, we're also being told as the peace prayer continues outside Ukraine embassy, the talks are continuing, but the firing is also continuing. There is dialogue underway in Belarus as we are speaking. And as we continue reporting from Kyiv, the shots around Kyiv are shocking because of the destruction that has taken place. I also want to tell our viewers, Ukraine has demanded ceasefire at the crucial talks at Belarus border. The West has sanctioned Russia. President Vladimir Putin puts nuclear weapons on alert. Belarus has also interestingly voted to go nuclear amid ally Russia's offensive on Ukraine. All these developments taken together are having the world pray for Ukraine. Similar peace prayers being held outside the Ukraine embassy. Kyiv administration, remember, this week is also saying to all its citizens to be taking shelter. Republic also, as we've been reporting from the war zone Kyiv, have seen the destruction around Kyiv. Remember, even as the peace prayer is taking place, as negotiations are continuing, Prime Minister Modi is going to be chairing 4th meeting on the Ukraine crisis, and our union ministers are also traveling to Ukraine's neighboring countries to oversee the evacuation operations. Candles are being put out. People are standing there in unison. Everyone praying for Ukraine, for refugees who've left the country, and for people stranded inside Ukraine, and for everyone as Russian troops are on day 5 of an invasion that's taking place in Ukraine. Viewers, Republic is the only channel that is reporting not only from the line of action in Kyiv, Ukraine, but also from the Hungarian-Slovakian border, which is seeing an influx of refugees. This is my colleague Shivani Sharma with this report. Take a look.
The situation is emerging each moment. Whenever we are there with a story, there is an update on the other side. I am right now in Slovakia. This is the border area. If my VJ Suren Shah can show you how the look is deserted, because this is the war time, and here there are no people which can be seen, and this is a different picture that is emerging after 5 days of war in Ukraine. And if we talk about the build up by the Russian troops in Spain and other parts, it shows how President Putin is now showing his complete strength on this whole situation, while the Ukrainian president is also now trying to get more aid from his allies, be it the Slovakian government that has now announced that it will be supplying the munitions, the anti-tank and air defense systems for Ukraine to get it stronger in this particular war. And in Kyiv also, the attacks are going more and more aggressive each day, and Russian president has also given a warning that the nuclear deterrence systems are ready. The defense minister has also reasserted the same, and the situation is quite tense in this whole region. If I talk about the European Union nations that are sharing the borders with Ukraine, be it Hungary, be it Slovakia, Poland, and all these countries are feeling the impact of this war that is going inside Ukraine. The facilities are now shrinking, not only inside Ukraine, but also in these neighboring states that share the border with Ukraine, because for us also reaching here, reporting from here in terms of logistics has been quite challenging, because the normal frequency of taxis or the normal frequencies of mode of transport is impacted certainly, and the movement of trucks, movement of vehicles across the borders has been impacted, because most of the borders have been now choked up with the people who want to get evacuated to their safe places, who are running from Ukraine to outside. More than 4 lakh people have already fled from Ukraine to safer places, and most of these countries in the European Union are welcoming the residents of Ukraine without any documents, because they need to help them. They want to help them. They want to show they are standing tall with Ukraine in this need of crisis. But Russia is now trying to show that how it is getting the control of the whole situation in Ukraine in terms of more and more attacks, more and more build-ups, and the claims that are coming in from President Zelensky also show that both the sides are now claiming that they are standing strong in this war. While the talks are on, there are hopes, but doesn't seem with the actions on ground, as we are reporting how the build-ups are increasing, not only from the Russian side, but the NATO is also claiming that it is supplying more and more weapons to Ukraine. It is having more and more exercises on the border areas. So now we are trying to get inside and close to those places where NATO is having its build-ups in terms of armored, in terms of its troops, and the emerging situation seems to be quite challenging, and people out here are worried and tensed.
Good afternoon. It's Diane Sayre here, the Lyndon LaRouche affiliated independent candidate running against Chuck Schumer for U.S. Senate. And I apologize for the bumpy ride, and no, I am not driving. I am the passenger in this car. But I wanted to get to you right away with an update while all the rhetoric is increasing and the hysteria about Vladimir Putin, the Nazi who has invaded Ukraine. First, it is worth going back to what happened in 2013 and 2014, which people don't want to discuss. And actually, I was thinking of the appropriateness of Lyndon LaRouche's decision to put the little Hitler mustache on Barack Obama in 2009, actually not because of what he was going to do to Ukraine, but because of his Nazi T4 healthcare plan to get rid of the useless eaters, because, you know, a morphine drip is a lot less expensive than serious medical care or treating cancer. But that aside, what did Obama do? And Victoria Nuland, who's back in the Biden administration, and remember, Biden was Obama's vice president at the time. So what did they do? They went over to Ukraine with $5 billion from the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the front group for the CIA. Some of it came from George Soros. And they organized a coup to overthrow Yanukovych, the elected leader of Ukraine. Why? Because he was not willing to stop working with Russia. He wanted to have trade with both Russia and the EU, but when he did not take the deal from the EU, they decided to overthrow him. In a very suspicious Maidan incident with many provocateurs, and at one point, as people may recall, there were snipers on the top of hotels who were actually shooting both police and demonstrators, which reminds me of something that happened recently in the United States about exactly a year ago at the Capitol. At any rate, what happened? Parliamentarians were beaten with baseball bats, police were set on fire, and Obama and Menendez and Schumer and others called this a great democratic change, the peaceful protesters at the Maidan. And they put a regime in place in Kiev, which had certain sympathies to Stepan Bandera, the collaborator of Adolf Hitler, who was known for brutally murdering thousands of Jews, Russians, and Poles. Now, I'm going to fast forward. Zelensky, who is Jewish and speaks Russian, was elected in 2019 probably because many people in Ukraine were fed up with this Nazi divisiveness of the Azov battalion, for example, who have a emblem on their arms that looks awfully a lot like a swastika. So he is elected. He sets up a reconciliation commission because it is true that under the regime installed by Obama, Russian-speaking people were, in one case in Odessa, rounded up, herded into a building and burned to death. In other cases in Donetsk and Lugansk, they also were shelling these enclaves for the last 8 years, which no one will tell you about. And then Crimea, where after the Odessa massacre, they decided to vote to rejoin the Russian Federation. Now, I'm not going through this to tell you that I think that it's great that Putin had to take the action he did. I'm telling you some background because the whole thing has been set up over many years, as President Putin has said. And he was very clear, even as late as December of 2021, he sent 2 proposed treaties to the United States saying that they needed assurances that NATO would not expand, that it was not acceptable to reduce the amount of time for a Russian response to less than 5 minutes to a nuclear strike. This was not agreed to. I will also say that it seems that Zelensky came under massive pressure from the neo-Nazis. He had actually created a reconciliation commission. The head of it was knocked over and thrown to the ground by members of the Azov battalion when they merely discussed allowing people in the East to have a referendum on whether they would be allowed to speak Russian or not. So I'm telling you this because you have to know the background. Prior to the Obama-Biden intervention, there was not such an issue in Ukraine, and the economy was relatively prosperous, certainly far better off than it is today. But what is the backdrop for this overall? Well, in 2008, there was a blowout of the financial system, which Lyndon LaRouche forecast in 2007. What did we do since then? Did we gear up our production, manufacturing? No. We printed money, trillions of dollars, to bail out all kinds of corrupt and bankrupt institutions run by people with morals like those of Jeffrey Epstein. That's what we've been doing. And this bubble, like all bubbles, is now going to burst. You've heard of the Great Reset. How are they going to implement that? How are they going to save themselves? What is Bill Gates doing? He's buying up all the farmland. What is BlackRock doing? Buying up all of the houses. Maybe there was a desire to provoke such a war and escalation so that they can come in and say Vladimir Putin is the one who caused the blowout. I don't know. At any rate, the way this can be resolved is twofold. One, Ukraine cannot be part of NATO. They must be neutral. There are possibility of talks going on between Zelensky and Putin and others on that subject. But what do we have to do really? The West has to change. The United States has to go back to the principles of our founding. Let me remind you that in 1991, during the Iraq War, where our ambassador to Iraq basically invited Saddam Hussein to invade Kuwait, told him the U.S. would do nothing if they did that, we dropped 782,000 rounds of depleted uranium on that country. Had Iraq ever attacked us? No. So the idea of the spectacular hypocrisy, I'm sorry to say it, but when Putin talks about the empire of lies, that is correct. So the only way that this can be resolved in the long term, or the situation can be created so that we don't have flare-ups again and again over Taiwan, over Iran, over something else, is that the United States has to change. We have to admit that this transatlantic system is bankrupt. We have to go back to the idea of a national bank, developing the nation, raising the standard of living. We're running around threatening people about human rights. Well, aren't we killing Julian Assange in prison? How about the people of the Bronx? How are they living? Buildings that burn down? This is ridiculous. And Americans are much better than that. We can do better than that. That's why I'm challenging Schumer in 2022. But please don't be fooled. Please don't buy the propaganda. This is a dangerous situation because of the insanity coming from the West and the British. And let me just say one other thing about Victoria Nuland that some of you may find of interest. When she was busy overthrowing the government of Ukraine and handing out Hostess Twinkies to people with Molotov cocktails, who was advising her on how to carry out this coup? None other than Christopher Steele of the MI6, who wrote about 100 letters on overthrowing the government of Ukraine. Christopher Steele of the famous Steele dossier. Another piece of the puzzle, was it not the phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky that led to the impeachment of Donald Trump? Well, that's a question, isn't it? And why is it that Hillary Clinton is being brought back out of what we hoped was a retirement to be the keynote speaker at the Democratic Convention in New York? Remember, Hillary Clinton actually wanted to shoot down Russian airplanes over Syria that were fighting ISIS. So, it's quite a mess. Happily, the American people are
The military aircrafts were loaded with personal protection equipment and sanitary supplies for Ukraine as it continues to fight full-blown Russian invasion. Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel also visited a crisis center helping Spaniards caught in Ukraine as the conflict continues. As Russian forces continued their advance on the fifth day of the military intervention, countries worldwide sent humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Well, as far as civilian movement is concerned, it's absolutely nil, rather, at least on the roads, because what we did was yesterday in the afternoon when we were on our way to two areas. One was a metro station and the other was the place where an attack took place, a missile strike took place. While we were on our way, it's completely fortified. This entire city is completely fortified. You would rather have the police right now on the tenterhooks, because the moment we were also reporting, Priyanka, cameras were out. They were quite agitated, not very sure whether their movement is being disclosed, because remember, there have been reports that have been doing the rounds that at least 30 people with arms have been moving around the city of Kiev. The Ukrainian police rather suspects that this could be Russian troops in Ukrainian army fatigue who are basically moving around the city, and that could indicate that there is a change in the tactic of the Russian troops.
Up next, viewers, we're getting you some breaking developments as far as Ukraine is concerned. Now, the traditionally neutral Switzerland will adopt all the sanctions that the European Union has already imposed on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Now, this is being told by the Swiss President Ignacio Cassis, and as he has stated on Monday, we have seen, viewers, how the rest of the world has been standing in solidarity with Ukraine, specifically the European Union, and of course central to France as well, that has also extended the largest aid in terms of $300 million additional aid in terms of humanitarian efforts and military equipment that is also being sent to Ukraine for fighting off the Russian troops. Now we see the traditionally neutral Switzerland also claiming that they will be adopting all of the sanctions that have been given by the European Union,
standing in solidarity with Ukraine, specifically the European Union,
Russia
and
in this entire invasion.
Central to France
Ukraine
as well,
by the
that
Russian
has also
troops.
extended the largest
We have
aid
seen the kind
in
of
terms of
diplomatic
$300 million
that took place from Russia
additional
and
aid
Ukraine, as
in terms
the
of humanitarian
talks
efforts
still
and
continues
military
in
equipment
Belarus,
that is
where
also
Russia
being
had
sent
claimed
to
that they
Ukraine
were in
for
fact
fighting off the
escalating
Russian
since
troops.
the NATO countries
Now we
had
see
made
the traditionally
severe
neutral
sanctions and
Switzerland
had made several
also
public
claiming that they will be
statements
adopting
against Russia.
all of the sanctions.
And now Switzerland, a traditionally neutral country, claiming that they will be taking up all the sanctions given by European Union. Shivani Sharma joins me on the broadcast as well from the Slovakian border. Shivani, what do you make of these statements that are coming in from the rest of the world, especially now Switzerland claiming they will be taking up all the sanctions given by European Union to Russia?
Et avec un certain nombre de pays partenaires,
dont
la Chine.
Actually becoming Russia versus rest of the world as we know.
Becoming Russia versus rest of the world as we know how the European Union is now coming up one by one with a lot of announcements, statements and sanctions against Russia, as the Switzerland has also announced, and before that Slovakia.
In fact, the leaders, both
Ukraine
to
has
West
about
and
support to Ukraine in this war,
those to South,
the
like in
war,
Turkey,
which has
everyone is
seen a lot of
very
devastation
concerned
and
about
lots of,
further escalations, not least very concerned about the
evolving
close
world
friends
order
that,
in which Russia is making its claims. Russia is making its claims. Russia is trying to show that it is controlling the situation. It is attacking in Kyiv and other places. The enhanced attacks are happening. On the other hand, there are statements that are coming in from European Union nations and especially the NATO members also
which are now standing in solidarity with Ukraine. They say that they will be putting sanctions more strongly on Russia, and other countries are also giving access to NATO military exercises and troop build-up along the border, especially if we talk about Poland, if we talk about Slovakia, and other countries also through the maritime borders too. So this is an evolving, emerging situation in the time of Russia-Ukraine war. Russia is also saying that it has kept the nuclear deterrence ready, and it will be activated within minutes if it is required. So these kind of aggressive statements are coming in from Russia, while the other side, the other countries are now coming in solidarity with Ukraine, like Switzerland and Slovakia and Poland and other countries that are also not only sending the military aid to Ukraine, but also now putting sanctions on Russia and talking of unity with Ukraine in this time of crisis.
Well, yes, Shivani, definitely the rest of the world coming in solidarity for Ukraine as the escalation on the ground continues. For the moment, Shivani, thank you. Up next, viewers, we're breaking some very important developments with respect to the Russia-Ukraine negotiations, where we're being told that the negotiations that had been going on in Belarus have come to an end. We will have to wait for an official confirmation as to what exactly had been discussed and whether both the delegations of Russia and Ukraine have been able to talk out the entire escalation that is going on the ground in Ukraine by the Russian troops. Remember, viewers, Ukraine had stated that the very first thing on the agenda will be that of immediate ceasefire on the ground. However, we have seen the situation on the ground escalating by the minute. Awaiting the official statement from the delegations as for the talks that have taken place, but the agenda that had been very, very clear. In fact, Ukraine had also made some very important statements claiming that Crimea as well, the southern peninsula of Ukraine that had been annexed by Moscow in 2014, is back on the table for negotiation and for exiting of the Russian troops from that particular region, as well as the rest of the Ukraine, where additional military troops had been sent by Russia over 5 days ago, and escalation had been continuing since then, and all of that has been on the agenda as far as Ukraine has concerned. And of course, an official confirmation is awaited as far as what exactly had been discussed finally in the talks, and whether these talks have reached to any kind of fruition as far as the military escalation on the ground by Russian troops and the retaliation by the Ukrainian troops continues. Gory images, viewers, that we're getting on the ground of civilians being injured, civilians being hurt, residential areas being targeted, and all of that really comes to this particular talk that has been going on in Belarus between the Ukrainian and the Russian delegation to discuss on how there will be an immediate ceasefire and whether there will be one, since there are a lot of agendas that the Ukrainian delegation had also gone in. Perhaps Russian delegation will also not take this very lightly, that Crimea had been put back on the table by the Ukrainian delegation. However, we will have to wait and watch as to what exactly the official statement comes out from this particular meeting that took place in Belarus after a lot of, in fact, 24 hours of
inside Ukraine. The Center for Information Resilience started the map online, captured, and then the destruction of war, not just on civilian infrastructure, but on human people.
А хто ви такі? Які вчення? Звідки ви? Які вчення? Ви що, росіяни?
Да.
Якого хера ви тут робите?
Ну, сейчас наш с вами разговор ни к чему не приведет.
Вы оккупанты, вы фашисты, вы
мы-
пришли на нашу землю.
Хорошо.
Какого хера вы пришли
Мы-
с оружием к нам?
Кто сказал? Женщина.
Возьмите семечки, положите сырые,
Хорошо.
чтобы хоть подсолнухи росли, когда вы здесь
Хорошо.
ляжете.
Сейчас наш разговор ни к чему не приведет. Давайте не будем усугублять эту ситуацию. Пожалуйста.
Как усугублять
Пожалуйста,
ситуацию?
не будем усугублять ситуацию. Наш с вами
Ребята,
разговор ни к чему не
ребята,
приведет.
положите в карманы
Ничего не
семечки.
решит. Наш с вами разговор.
Я поняла, положите семечки или
Хорошо.
семена цветов.
Я-
Вы здесь семенами
я
и ляжете.
Сделаю.
Вы
Да,
пришли
хорошо.
на мою землю.
Хорошо, я вас выслушал.
Вы понимаете?
Я вас
Вы оккупанты.
Хорошо.
Вы враги.
Да.
И вы уже с этой секунды прокляты.
Да,
Я вам отвечаю.
все. Теперь послушайте меня.
Я вас услышала.
Не будем усугублять ситуацию, пройдите.
А куда уже усугублять? Вы пришли, блядь, непрошенные
Хорошо.
твари, конченые.
обнаружен схрон, на
Good Lord, look at these clips. You know what? One thing that keeps crossing my mind as I'm scrolling through Twitter and I'm seeing these clips of what it looks like is what is real and not real.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
How are we supposed to, oh my God. How quickly can we fact check these things? And if you were trying to encourage support from, let's say, North America, show us the worst clips that you can find.
Yeah.
And on the Russian side of it, what are the clips people are seeing there? And what would the government's best interest would be clean. Oh, look at this. The Ukrainian people are welcoming us. That's where the information part comes in.
Your message is
like, you ever watch those clips from North Korea where everyone's just like, woo?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's obviously not real.
Yeah.
Yeah, fake footage. Like, how hard is it to make fake footage? 10 photos and videos from Russia's invasion of Ukraine that are actually fake. Look at that today at 7:30. People are already doing it. They got this stuff ready to go. They probably got a whole team, a whole floor of people. This is going to be the hardest part this time around. Is telling the real from the fake. You know? People able to create narratives. That one was fake. We were just watching that one.
Yeah. That was from China.
Yeah. I'm telling you, man. Come on. That's a blast in Beirut. That's a crazy blast. Actually, I believe this was
we covered this.
Yeah, what was that? An ammunition factory or something? Or
Fireworks?
Fertilizer? I don't know what was being stored there, but some serious explosive, obviously. Like, look at that. You look at that and you're like, oh, mass destruction. You ever seen a nuke?
Ooh.
That's a sesame seed.
Yeah.
To a nuke. Yo, it's weird that we're talking about this in 2022. We're just talking about how like post-war we've been for a long time, as far as like large-scale war. See, why does that clip look like not right now as well? Does this clip look real to you? I mean, it could be a real moment, but I'm saying, how do we know it's right now?
Yeah, you wouldn't.
And how do we know it's this conflict? Like, anything can be used to finesse.
All is fair in love and war, right?
Well, we're just gonna have to be like really have the laser beams on when it comes to analysis of this and how we're gonna extract truth from this complicated media landscape. Like that clip is not happening in Russia right now. Right? That's one of the ones.
This is one of
yeah,
those,
it's not that's not happening in Russia right now. People are looking at it though. But
is this fake?
Yeah, that's the one.
That was one.
That was the one from China.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but it's got 100,000 views. 100,000 people saw it. It's got the hashtag.
It's #1 in the top.
Exactly. Exactly. But, to a certain extent, what's the difference? Explosion, pain, terror.
Watch the real ones. They're just equally as horrible.
But there's a finesse to it.
Yeah.
As far as like, what is the powerful clip?
Mm-hmm.
What's the
draws the most eyes?
What's the cinematic clip?
Yeah.
So it's a weird way to think about it, but you know that Russia's maneuvering that way.
Absolutely.
They're going to use all content, all manipulation, all modification. That's like modern day propaganda.
Yeah.
It's going to happen on social media. It's going to happen in ways you don't necessarily expect it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that to me looks like St. Petersburg, and that looks like right now. So I'm going with that one.
Okay.
No, I'm going with that one.
All right. I'll go with it too.
I'm going with that one. Well, I mean, you can click on the guy. This is what I really encourage people to do. Click on the guy. Executive Director, Demcast USA, writing for Huffington Post. Let's see. Is it a repost that he has here, or is it his footage? See there?
From Nexta.
Okay, let's check them out. Eastern European media to let the world know. This is getting sources, figuring out what to Russian
Right.
army lost more than 30 tanks. So this is the other thing. Who lost what? Right? You want to intimidate.
Mm-hmm.
I saw some number. It was like, 40 Ukrainian soldiers have died. And then like 50 Russian soldiers have died. That's come from Ukrainian office. Right? They like that ratio. That's like, I want to fight. Yeah, we can take them. 40, 50. I like that ratio. This is the type of thing that goes back and forth. I'm not saying that there's just finesse to it.
Yeah.
How you report it, when you do your tallies, how you make it seem. You think that's what they're saying in Russia? You think in Russia they're saying we killed 40 Ukrainians and they killed 50 Russians?
No.
You think they're saying that in Russia?
Oh.
You think Putin's going on the air and saying that?
No.
No, he's saying we're dominating.
Yeah.
He said
We're clean.
we didn't lose anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll save that for later.
More scenes of carnage in Ukraine as Russian forces inch closer to the center of the capital of Kiev. Air raid sirens sounding moments ago, while gunfire and explosions are being heard throughout the day. U.S. officials warning that the key city could fall by this weekend. But the Ukrainians are putting up a fight. Russia facing more resistance than thought. Ukrainian citizens taking up arms and are encouraged to make Molotov cocktails. President Zelensky, who says he is